What if I told you that England's most transformative age wasn't the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution, but the era lost between kings and chaos, the late Middle Ages? From the death of a tyrant king to the birth of the Tudor dynasty, England faced nearly 3 centuries of collapse, plague, revolution, and civil war, a time when children ruled kingdoms, peasants dared to rise, and crowns were won not by birth, but by blood. This isn't the medieval history you read in textbooks. This is the real story of how England bled, broke, and rebuilt itself, forging the path toward the modern world. You've heard of the Black Death and the Wars of the Roses, but have you ever truly lived them? Let's step into the forgotten heart of England's past, where every crown was contested, every throne stood on sand, and every chapter reshaped the kingdom forever. The death of King John in 1216 marked a fragile moment for England. His disastrous reign had left the kingdom fractured, its barons furious, and a French prince, Louis, invited by rebellious nobles to take the throne. Into this chaos stepped the 9-year-old Henry III, crowned at Gloucester amidst civil war, with his regents, notably William Marshal, acting quickly. They reissued Magna Carta in an effort to pacify the barons and reclaim the loyalty of a divided realm. Prince Louis's hopes of wearing the English crown soon faded. Marshal's tactical genius, combined with the wavering support of English nobles, forced Louis to retreat. By 1217, with the Treaty of Lambeth, England had expelled the foreign invader and turned back to its own turbulent reconstruction. Though peace returned, it was precarious. Young Henry III would grow up in a kingdom still haunted by baronial suspicion and the memory of failed kingship. Henry's long reign began under heavy shadows. As he took the reins of power, he sought to emulate the glory of earlier monarchs, investing heavily in cathedral building and promoting continental influences at court. Yet, his generosity to foreign favorites angered the barons once again. Tensions mounted slowly, eventually boiling into a full-scale conflict. Simon de Montfort, once a royal ally, emerged as the symbol of resistance. He challenged Henry's excesses and demanded reforms that would limit royal authority. In 1264, at the Battle of Lewes, Montfort defeated and captured both the king and his heir. For over a year, England was effectively governed by baronial rule, and Montfort summoned a revolutionary parliament that included commoners, a first in English history. Edward I, Henry's son, returned from crusade in 1274 to assume the throne. He was a commanding presence, tall, stern, and politically astute. Determined to restore royal authority, Edward moved swiftly to reform the law, summon model parliaments, and bring unruly regions under control. His vision was not just for England, but a united Britain under English rule. Wales became his first target. through campaigns of military brutality and castle building. Edward subdued the Welsh princes and declared his infant son the Prince of Wales, a tradition that endures today. The great stone fortresses he constructed stood as monuments to his ambition and a warning to any would-be rebels. Scotland proved more defiant, with the Scottish succession in question after the death of Alexander III. Edward asserted his right to arbitrate, effectively making Scotland a vassal state. But resistance flared, led by William Wallace, whose victory at Stirling Bridge electrified Scotland. Edward's vengeance was swift and ruthless, capturing and executing Wallace and launching deeper invasions northward. Despite his harsh methods, Edward was an effective ruler. He formalized legal systems, reformed Parliament, and left England more centralized than he had found it. But his final years were dominated by failing health and an unending war with Scotland, leaving his son an inheritance heavy with conflict and unresolved ambition. Edward II lacked his father's fire and command. He surrounded himself with favorites like Piers Gaveston, whose arrogance alienated the nobility. Discontent brewed quickly, and barons demanded Gaveston's exile. Edward yielded, then recalled him, only for Gaveston to be hunted down and executed by rebellious lords. His disastrous military leadership, especially the defeat at Bannockburn in 1314 against Robert the Bruce, further shattered his credibility. England's northern frontier burned under Scottish raids, and Edward grew increasingly isolated. His reliance on another unpopular favorite, Hugh Despenser, reignited baronial fury and triggered a civil war. This time, rebellion came from within the royal family. Queen Isabella, disillusioned and humiliated, allied with her lover Roger Mortimer and invaded England in 1326. Edward was captured, deposed, and later murdered in secret. The throne passed to his young son, Edward III, under the regency of Isabella and Mortimer. Edward III came to power with ambition and charisma. By 1330, he overthrew Mortimer in a daring coup and seized full control. He revived royal prestige and set his sights on reclaiming lost honor through war. In 1337, he laid claim to the French throne, igniting the 100 Years' War. In 1346, English longbowmen decimated the French chivalry. The triumph was legendary. Calais fell and became a strategic English outpost. Edward's son, the Black Prince, continued the campaign with victories at Poitiers, capturing the French king himself. England basked in glory, yet the war was costly. Taxes soared and discontent simmered. Even more devastating was the Black Death, which swept through England in 1348. Half the population perished, villages emptied, fields went untilled. The plague disrupted the social order, giving laborers newfound power to demand higher wages. In the chaos, Parliament gained importance. Edward's reign saw the crown increasingly dependent on parliamentary approval for funding, marking a shift in English governance. The monarch still ruled, but the people, through their representatives, had begun to push back. Richard II inherited a weary kingdom at just 10 years old, while the crown was managed by his uncles. Discontent among the peasantry reached breaking point. In 1381, a poll tax sparked the peasants' revolt. Thousands marched on London, led by Wat Tyler, demanding an end to serfdom and fairer governance. Richard, only 14, met the rebels personally and agreed to their demands, then betrayed them. Tyler was murdered, and the revolt collapsed in brutal reprisals. Yet the revolt signaled a shift. The Commons were no longer voiceless. England's social fabric was changing. As Richard matured, he became increasingly authoritarian. He crushed dissent and exiled rivals, including his powerful cousin, Henry Bolingbroke. But his tyranny backfired. In 1399, Bolingbroke returned, deposed Richard, and crowned himself Henry IV, launching the Lancastrian dynasty. Richard died imprisoned and childless. His reign marked the failure of autocracy in the face of growing calls for shared power and accountable kingship. Henry IV's rule was plagued by rebellion and illness, from Welsh uprisings led by Owain Glyndwr to plots from disaffected nobles. The kingdom remained unstable, yet Henry survived, passing the crown to his warrior son, Henry V, in 1413. Henry V was everything a medieval king aspired to be: brave, devout, and ruthless in battle. In 1415, he launched a campaign in France and triumphed at the legendary Battle of Agincourt. Despite overwhelming odds, his victory shocked Europe and revived England's imperial dreams. He married Catherine of Valois, daughter of the French king, and was named heir to the French throne. For a moment, it seemed England and France might be united under one crown. But Henry's sudden death in 1422, at just 35, left an infant son as king of both realms. Henry VI inherited the thrones of England and France as a child, but he lacked his father's strength. England lost ground in France, facing defeats that shattered morale. At home, Henry's passivity and bouts of mental illness created a power vacuum. Ambitious nobles filled the void, especially Richard, Duke of York, who challenged the king's advisors. By the 1450s, factions within the nobility erupted into violence, plunging England into the Wars of the Roses. The crown passed between Lancastrians and Yorkists like a prize in a deadly game. Henry was captured, restored, and imprisoned again. His fragile rule ended with his death in the Tower of London, likely murdered. The Plantagenet dynasty was in its death throes, and England cried out for stability. Edward IV, a Yorkist warrior, seized the throne and brought temporary calm, but dynastic rivalry never slept. When Edward died, his brother Richard took power as Richard III after declaring Edward's sons illegitimate. The princes in the Tower vanished, presumed murdered, casting a shadow over Richard's reign. Many saw Richard as a usurper. In 1485, Henry Tudor landed in Wales and marched to challenge him. At the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard was slain, and Henry claimed the crown as Henry VII. With Richard's death ended the Plantagenet era, a dynasty that had ruled for over 300 years. England stood battered, divided, but ready for rebirth. The Tudors would now shape the dawn of modern England. The late Middle Ages were not merely a time of decline, but one of transformation. England passed through darkness of war, plague, tyranny, but emerged with the seeds of a new world. Parliament had grown in power. The feudal order was fading. A modern monarchy was rising, and in the ashes of roses, a new England was born. As the blood of Bosworth soaked the fields and the Plantagenet era breathed its final breath, England stood at the threshold of something new. The late Middle Ages had not been an age of fading glory, but of fierce struggle, radical transformation, and a relentless fight for survival. Through every baronial rebellion, every plague cart, every shattered alliance and fallen king, a nation was being forged in fire. The old feudal order crumbled. The power of Parliament grew. The seeds of modern monarchy, national identity, and constitutional rule had taken root, and from the ashes of the roses rose the Tudors, bringing with them the dawn of Renaissance, Reformation, and Empire. This is why history matters, not just for what it tells us about who we were, but for what it reveals about who we are. Like and subscribe if you believe stories like these deserve to be remembered. Because the past is not dead, it's how we got here.